about to leave, already packing. Come with me, I'm not really asking. We'll get away to a place where we don't know. About to see the world in action, what we can be, life with no distractions. We'll get away, this is what we waited for. Take my hand, we'll make it somehow. We can't miss out. I'm done living life with the lights out. Die with my own doubts. Be free with me. Let's go, let's be free with me. Be free. Not looking back, eyes on the freeway, Bonnie and Clyde, a classic cliche. We're on the run, this is what we waited for. Take my hand, we'll make it somehow. We can't miss out. I'm done living life with the lights out. Die with my own doubts. Be free. Let's go, let's be
Good evening, everyone. It's Jim here at Tutor HQ. A warm welcome to the first in our new series of GCSE Sociology live streams, our study live streams. And the focus this term is on this regular slot on a Monday at 5:30. If you're joining us live, is we're going to pick some specific topics, particularly introductory topics in key areas, and just spend 25 to 30 minutes or so giving you an overview of the key content for that topic, but also some activities for you to test your knowledge and understanding. A really good way of revising and studying at the same time. And I'm joined this evening by a familiar face, if you've been to any of our sociology events before, Vicky, who's going to guide us through. Vicky, you're on your own tonight. A tough gig.
Yeah, it is.
But,
my first sociology live stream, and also my first, broadcasting by myself. But hopefully,
I'll be here to help you though. So if at
Yeah,
any stage
good.
you need any advice on any of the topics, then just ask.
Yeah,
And,
I'll
we'll
set
be-
off like an alarm when I need a bit of backup.
All right, it'd be great. So I know, just to explain a little bit of housekeeping, if you've not been to one of these sessions before, if you're joining us live, and I can see from the data that lots of people are joining us live there on YouTube, you can have a go at the questions if you wish on the activities by typing your answers into the live chat window. So don't be shy, give it a go. But we won't hang around forever for the answers. Try and get them in as quickly as possible. Maybe get a shout out if you're the first. We know from experience, though, that the vast majority of students who watch this session do so on catch-up, and you are at an advantage. Although you can't use the live chat, of course, what you can do is pause the video and give yourself a bit more time. Maybe if you're working as part of a pair or group in class or part of homework, give yourself some time and then start the video again and see what the answers are that Vicky takes us through. So, Vicky, I think we're almost set to start. Is there anything else to say before we get going?
No. So obviously we're looking at the social construction of crime and deviance today, which is one of the trickier ideas on the spec. And each week we've kind of chosen specific ideas that we know that students find a little bit tricky. So hopefully that's going to help you. If you've got any questions in the live chat, then please pop them in as well, and we'll see if we can answer those along the way.
Superb. Right. Have fun, everyone. I'll have a go at the questions as well, Vicky.
Excellent. Okay, welcome to our first GCSE Sociology live study stream. So like I said, over the next few weeks, we're going to cover a different variety of aspects of the crime and deviance topic. So we're starting off the social construction of crime and deviance this week. We're going to look at social control next week, and then we've got a couple more crime sessions. And then after the half term, we're going to be looking at families and education and doing a little bit of research methods as well that you might not have done for a while. So we're going to kick off this session with some altered vowels. These are all key words that you would have come across early on in this topic. Each one will be on the screen for a short period of time, and you need to type in the answer into the chat stream if you are watching live. Obviously, if you're not watching live, you can pause slightly. So we're going to start off with our first one. Okay, this one does look like it's quite related to crime. So enemy, I'm not going to be able to pronounce all of the altered vowels. So we are looking for the words that this should be. So E, and I are all completely incorrect here. What do we think this word should be? Okay, if you can have a quick look, try and pop it into the chat window. It is quite a difficult one, this one, to start off with. Let's give you a moment. Okay, so those vowels have been replaced. What do you think the word should be? So I think this is quite a tricky one. So I'm going to give you a bit of help to start with. So this one begins with A. Excellent. We have got the correct answer coming up in the chat window. Excellent. It is enemy. It's the idea that there's been a breakdown in those moral values or rules that normally govern society. It's that lack of social cohesion where those norms don't exist. Quite often when we teach this concept, we talk about things like riots, maybe the London riots in 2011, where kind of everybody, all law and order just completely broke down. There was no rules. Right, next one up, please, Jim. Excellent. So this one I think is a little bit easier, hopefully. So low belong. What do we think this one might be? So we're going to look at this a bit later in this session. So it's also that you would have covered in your education studies earlier on in the year, back in year 10. So again, if you can pop your answers in the chat window if you think you know. Again, this one is a little bit easier than the last one. Okay, Jim, can we have the correct answer on the screen, please? Excellent. So it is labelling. So the idea of giving somebody a label, either positive or negative, which can trigger a chain of events. And we're going to look at labelling theory and particularly Becker's work on that a bit later in the session. Okay, next one, please. This one is a real toughie. Oh, well done. I just spotted there that Marissa had got that one correct first. Marissa. Okay, now I'm going to give you a clue here. This one is a branch of sociology. Okay, so what do we think it might be? It begins with a vowel, so hopefully that will make it a little bit easier. Again, these sociologists are quite interested in labelling. Let's see if we can get the correct answer into the chat window. I'll give you 5 more seconds. Okay, I think this one has stumped people watching. Well done, Marissa. Excellent work. It is interactionism. So a branch of sociology that looks at relationships. Again, when you looked at labelling in schools, you would have looked at interactionists, and we're going to look at Howard Becker, a famous interactionist, a bit later this session. Okay, can we have the next one up, please, Jim? Okay. So this is something that we're going to cover a bit later in this session. So it's all about, it's a piece of work done by a famous American sociologist. It's all to do with reasons why people commit crime. So hopefully we have covered this one before. Certainly in previous revision blasts, we have covered this one in lots and lots of detail. So what do we think it might be? Excellent. Well done, Tareen. That's excellent. So it is strain theory. So Merton's strain theory that we're going to have a look at in the second part of this session. So we have one more. If we can have that on the screen, please, Jim. Excellent. So 3 letters this time. Hopefully it is relatively easy. It's to do with labelling. Okay, again, you would have seen it in the education unit. You will see it in the crime unit. What do we think it might be? Okay, I'm going to give you a few more seconds. Excellent. Well done, Tareem and Marissa. It is a self-fulfilling prophecy. So it's the idea that we can make predictions about what happens, but it's linked to labelling, so that, you know, we give somebody a negative label, they live up to that label. We give somebody a positive label, they might live up to that label as well. So we'll talk about that a bit later in this session. Okay, Jim, can we have the next slides on, please? Super. So this session, we are going to cover 3 things. Firstly, we're going to think about the social construction of concepts of crime and deviance. We're going to think about some perspectives related to this. We are also going to look at functionalist Merton, and we're going to look at his structural theory that crime is caused by strains placed on society. And we're going to look at Howard Becker, who we've already mentioned, an interactionist. He kind of looks at subcultural theories, and he talks about how crime is caused by labelling. So firstly, we're going to think about this afternoon what we actually mean by a social construction. So it basically means that something varies over time and place, and also context, which I will add in a minute. So if we just start off reminding ourselves of those basic definitions, crime is something that goes against the law, whereas something being a deviant act is something that goes against social norms. So it doesn't necessarily need to be illegal. So if we think about how it's being a social construction varies over time. Well, a really good example of that is homosexuality. So previously, this was viewed as deviant, and it was in fact illegal and could result in a prison sentence. And actually, it only became legal in our country in 1967. It is seen obviously far more acceptable today. There are also things that were widespread and really seen as acceptable across the UK, which no longer are. So, for example, the smoking ban in 2007 outlawed smoking indoors. Prior to that, really acceptable, absolutely. 2004, the Hunting Act, which made fox hunting illegal again, that is something that was seen as really acceptable, no longer is. If we then sort of go back to the idea, like my example of homosexuality, previously the age of consent was higher. It used to be 21. It was lowered to 16 in 2000. So again, that's the idea of something becoming a crime, or something no longer being a crime that perhaps previously was. It also varies around the globe. So hence at the bottom of the screen there, it says place. So we take the example of laws of consent. They are really different compared sort of thinking about where you live. So it is 16 in the UK, 21 in Bahrain, which is the highest across the globe. Second place highest is South Korea, who have an age of 20. Lowest in the world is Nigeria, and they have an age of consent of 11, which I think lots of us would think was quite horrifying. And if we think then again back to that idea of place, they're going back to the example of homosexuality, nearly 69 countries across the world that have laws that criminalise homosexuality. Nigeria and Uganda, for example, have actually tightened their laws recently. So again, this is the whole idea of things varying through time and place. Context is also quite important. So for example, if we use the example of murdering somebody, we know that that would be viewed as wrong because it is in most situations. However, in a war situation, then perhaps it could be seen as heroic. Okay, so it is also a product of the society, both of these things. So society creates what is deviant and what is not. This is often dictated by the ruling classes, and you would have come across the ruling class a lot in your sociology studies. A really good example of this would be the Euros earlier in the summer. We saw lots and lots of violence being carried out by a very small minority of football fans, but it was really widely publicised, and those fans were seen as deviant. Their behaviour was really not, we judged that quite harshly. We thought that they were letting the country down. But if we think back to other groups of people, so some of you will know the Bullingdon Club, which is quite a famous dining club at Oxford University. Boris Johnson was a member of the Bullingdon Club. They used to spend quite a lot of time smashing up restaurants, doing all sorts of things that we wouldn't approve of and we would think are quite deviant. But at the time, they were viewed as letting off steam because of who they were. And then finally, when we think about crime and deviance being a product of society, the media plays a huge role in this. So they will decide what to publish, what we will watch, what we are going to see, and they will often focus on those different certain groups to make them seem much more deviant. So in brackets, it says Stan Cohen and his moral panics. So he did lots of work on this, and he looked at moral panics where people were led to believe that certain groups were much more deviant than perhaps they actually were, and they were to be feared when perhaps they didn't need to be feared. They then received lots more attention by the media, which then meant people feared them even more. So it became a bit of a self-fulfilling prophecy, if you were. Right, thank you, Jim. Can we have the next slide up, please? Okay, so I said that we were going to have a look at two ideas about where crime stems from. Why do people commit the crime that they do? So the first one that we're going to have a look at is Robert Merton and his idea of strain theory. So he's a functionalist, and he came up with his theory after considering the pressure on people to succeed in society. And I've got on the board there the idea of the American dream. So it's a set of goals that we have kind of been told we should achieve, and we will achieve those if we work hard. So it's a very meritocratic idea. Everyone is striving for the same goals, but unfortunately not everybody has the same means of achieving them. And we're always told that if we work hard, we'll be rewarded. However, this is not always the case, and this leads to all sorts of strain and pressure. So he says there is a strain between the goals and the means to achieve them, which end up leading to crime. Merton said that when we are faced with pressure or strain, we will react in 5 different ways. And our next activity is going to have a look at that. So if we can have that up on the screen, please, Jim. So we're going to do a 60-second challenge. So we're going to have 5 strains as Merton identified. And then on the other side of the screen, we have the actual definitions of those screens. So what I need from you guys is to just pop the matching letters and numbers into the chat window. If you are watching not live, obviously you can give yourself a little bit more detail. Okay, so I'm going to give you 60 seconds on the clock. Off you go. Can we have 60 seconds, please, Jim? Okay, so like I've said, all of the 5 on the left are the ways that people respond to strain. So we have conformity, we have ritualism, we've got retreatism, innovation, and we have rebellion. And on the other side of the screen, we have those definitions. So have a look at them, think which one goes with which, and you're just matching letters and numbers into that chat window. So using socially unapproved or unconventional means to obtain culturally approved goals. Or are we rejecting cultural goals and the means to obtain them? Using socially approved means to achieve more humble and modest goals. Pursuing the cultural goals through socially approved means, and rejecting the cultural goals and means and working to replace them with something else. You have 5 seconds left on the clock. Okay, we've got a couple of attempts in that chat window. We appreciate it's quite quick, this one. So if you're watching later, then give yourself another minute or so, put it on pause, and let's see how many you can guess. Jim, can we have the correct answers up, please? Excellent. So A4 goes together. So conformity, pursuing those cultural goals through socially approved means. So this is what most people would hope to do. So for example, we would take exams, we'd study hard, do lots of revision, save up money for those things that you want to buy, maybe work in 2 jobs if you need to. Obviously not ideal, but that's a way of getting that money to achieve those goals. Then we have ritualism, so B3 together, using socially approved means to achieve more humble and modest goals. So maybe having a smaller home, less well-paid job, less exotic holidays, not needing to have the latest technology. You know, you still want to have nice things, but maybe not quite the need to have things that are spectacular. Okay, retreatism, C2, rejecting both the cultural goals and the means to attain them. So some examples would be people that perhaps choose to live on the streets, people that turn to drugs or alcohol, people that almost drop out of society, as it were, and you kind of look at groups of people that are living on the fringes of society when you do stratification later this term or next term. Okay, so D1, using the unapproved or unconventional means to obtain those culturally approved goals. So you want the stuff, but you're just not willing to work for it, or you can't work for it. So in this case, we're talking about people turning to crime, perhaps committing fraud. They might be, gaining money that's not rightfully theirs. And then finally, at the bottom, we have rebellion, rejecting the cultural goals and means and working to replace them with something else. So actually, you're not interested in the American dream or the idea of meritocracy. You will go for something else entirely. So a good example of this would be sort of extremist behaviour, people pursuing their own goals, people engaging in terrorist behaviour, for example. Excellent. Thank you, Jim. Can we move on to the next slide, please? Okay, so our last theory that we're going to have a look at is Howard Becker and his labelling theory. So Howard Becker was an interactionist. He's interested in people and their relationships and kind of what that means and how it affects people's behaviour. So he argued that what makes something deviant is not what it's done, but how people react to what is being done. And the only thing that deviant acts have in common is that they are labelled deviant by others. So he claimed that the way people are treated and the labels they're given are why some people turn to crime. And he said the label depends on a number of factors. It's often linked to a number of assumptions that are made based on class, perhaps based on ethnicity, but also the context of the deviant behaviour in the first place. And he was really interested in the effects of labelling, and he talked about how it can lead to that idea of a self-fulfilling prophecy, the idea that you become that negative label that people give you. So our next activity is going to look at this in a little bit more detail. I'm going to show you some sentences on the board. You need to scramble those. It's scrambled up. You need to put them into the correct order to explain the effects of labelling. So they are not in the right order at the moment. This hopefully is something that you have come across, the idea of those things that trigger onto something else. I'm going to read them through with you if you are going to read the small print on the screen. So at the top we have master status. This is the main way we think of ourselves and we label ourselves, and the main thing that people see is related to how we live our lives. We have the label being reinforced. We start to behave in the way that we have been labelled, which may encourage further deviance. For example, drug addicts may steal to finance their habit. So again, we're getting that self-fulfilling prophecy that we keep mentioning this session. 3, self-concept, how we see ourselves. We accept the deviant label that we have been given. 4, negative label given based on the context of the event. I've already used this example actually earlier in the session. For example, somebody killing an enemy during war may be seen as heroic, but in the majority of cases it would be seen as murder. And then finally at the bottom, deviant career, becoming a career criminal. For example, convicted criminals might find it hard to get a job and maintain relationships. They might even join up with other deviant groups. So what we need from you, and probably if you are watching this on catch up, you have got a slightly easier job here because you can pause it and you can give yourself a little bit more detail. You just need to pop those numbers in the right order. Currently they are not. So what do we think? So we label something, what then happens? Okay, Jim, can you put the correct order, the sentences unscrambled, onto our screen? Excellent. So we start off giving somebody that negative label. Okay, we've already talked about that. So label somebody as negatively. Then we move on to self-concept. So people start to see themselves with that negative label. So they start to accept that label and kind of believe that's what they are. We then have that label being reinforced. People have told you you are something, therefore you start to behave in that way. Again, this links really nicely to self-fulfilling prophecy ideas perhaps would have come across in the education unit. This then turns into a mind. It's the main way that we think of and label ourselves, but it's also the main thing that people see when they look at you for the first time. So they look at you and they view you as this and nothing else. They kind of ignore all those other important things about your life. And finally, that leads to that deviant career. So, if you've got that master status, you're behaving how the label, your label's reinforced, the self-fulfilling prophecy has happened. It does mean that it's going to be very, very difficult for you to get out of that cycle, possibly ending up becoming a career criminal, because we know that once you are convicted of a crime, it is really, really, really difficult to get back and get your life back to how it was beforehand, no matter how hard you try. Okay, that's something that you will look at a bit later in more detail in the crime unit. Okay, Jim, can we have the next slide up, please? So one of the features of all of our new live study streams for all subjects is that we are including a little bit of exam practice, which is something we haven't done before in live sessions. So each week we're going to pop on a exam question for you, and we're going to give you some tips on how to answer this one well. And actually, it would be a really good idea after the session for you to perhaps attempt to answer this question yourself. So identify and explain one reason that makes the concept of deviance difficult to define for sociologists. It's a 4-marker. Okay, now it has told us that it only wants one reason, so we need to make sure that we are putting a detail in here. So Jim, can we have the next slide up, please? So identify and explain one reason. I've underlined one reason because quite often students will write about far more, and you've only been asked to write about one reason, so you need to make sure that that's all you do. So what we would advise in this situation is that you think about what is seen as deviant by society. Think about what I was talking about earlier, about how that varies from place to place and how it varies from time. How is it dependent on perception? So what one person views as deviant, somebody else might think it was completely normal. Okay, and that's right through society. So that's really age dependent, for example. And finally, consider those cultural norms. So what we might think of something that is deviant, it might be completely fine and completely within the law and normal in other countries. So like I said, remember those social constructs vary over time and place, okay? And get that term into your answer. It is a social construct. That's why it is difficult to define. Can we have the next slide up, please, Jim? So another thing, again, linked to those exam practice questions, is just some tips really on how to answer that question well. Exam goal. So an examiner will want to see one reason developed fully. Okay, you are going to need, for a 4-marker, you're going to need to write several lines of content here. And like I've already said, that if you write about more than one reason, you will not get credit for those additional reasons. So you need to be really careful that you don't fall into the trap. The examiner marking your paper is going to want to see that you understand the key term deviance. So start off with this, okay? Remember, it is that social construct. It's about viewing, it's about doing something that is against the norms of society. It's not necessarily illegal, but it can be. So we've said you need to pick just one reason. So focus on either changes over time or between locations. Okay, and you need an example to back up the point you have made. So we've talked already a lot in this session about the acceptance of homosexuality, but there are lots of other things that you could say there. Okay, but again, just make sure that you are trying to develop as much detail as possible and that you are focusing on that one reason and you're focusing on it well and getting some good key terms in there. Social construct, get deviance in there, think about the idea about how it's really difficult to define because of all those things that we've got in this session. Okay, we have one last challenge for you, and it is a 30-second challenge. It is just getting you to think about 2 of the things that we have covered in the previous activities. So our first question, you 30 seconds on the clock. What are the different responses to strain identified by Robert Merton? So if you can pop these into the chat window, they should be in your mind now because we have just done an activity on this. It's just to get you thinking, making sure it's stuck in. Can we have 30 seconds on the clock, please, Jim? So think back to that activity we just did when we were matching up different responses to strain to their key definitions. And you shouldn't need any more than 30 seconds, but if you're watching it not live, then obviously you can pause and give yourself a moment. Okay, 30 seconds are up, so let's have the answers on the screen. Okay, so we've got conformity, innovation, treatism, ritualism, and rebellion, like we have just talked about. Okay, next question, or our final question, please. So what are the stages of Howard Becker's labelling theory? Again, 30 seconds on the clock. So normally we have some quite snazzy music going on our timer, and for some reason it's not working today. Hopefully that's not affecting your concentration too much. So the stages of Howard Becker's labelling theory that we've just gone through in that previous activity. So think about some of those key terms that we came across. Okay, time is up, so we have the answers on the screen. So we have that negative label leading to self-concept, leading to the label being reinforced, leading to the master status, and leading to that deviant career. Excellent. Jim, can we have the final slide up, please? Thank you so much for tuning in, and for those of you that took part. Remember, you can watch these sessions back on replay on the TU demand page. I suspect some of you will be watching some replay because you've been asked to do it for homework from your teachers from school. It's an excellent use of homework. Please also have a look at the links that are on the screen currently. So we've got some excellent revision question cards. We've got a brilliant student workbook on crime. So you can go to the tutoru.net technology page, or you can follow the QR code that is currently on the screen. And hopefully we will see you next week when we talk through it's just gone out of my head, social control, and how that links to obviously crime, and we'll particularly be focusing on the feminist viewpoint of crime there as well.
Superb stuff. Bang on half an hour. Well, I mean, that's a great example of the new format where we've packed a whole load in there for 30 minutes. So we've covered some of the key concepts and topics, but also how to go at checking knowledge and understanding as we go. And some exam gold as well. So that 4 marker was a cracking question, wasn't it? No need to write lots of different points. Just one point that's focused on the question.
Yeah.
Properly explained, gets you the top marks. Superb stuff.
Yeah, absolutely.
Huge thanks to Vicky for guiding us through that session. So if you're watching on catch up, then hopefully you've done as well as the students who've been with us on the live chat. And this is a regular slot for GCSE Sociology, 5:30 on a Monday this term. So don't forget to subscribe to the YouTube channel to get a notification when all the new sessions are added and when they go live. And of course, if you go to tutor2.net/live, you can go back over the sessions once they've been run. And there's some great stuff on there as well that we did earlier this year when we were doing some revision sessions to support students taking assessments in the summer just gone. So if you look at the replay section, you'll find a whole bunch of sessions that are well worth looking at there as well. I think we're done. So
and can we add, you can obviously download the slides. Sorry, I was just saying that you can download the slides and obviously use those either in class, or you can use them as part of your revision notes.
Superb. Absolutely right. Yep. So go back to this session on Tutor2 and you can download the slides, print them off, add them to your notes, for example, on strain theory, labelling and the rest. A great source of notes as well. Superb stuff. Right, we will call it a day there. So hopefully you can have a good evening ahead. Put your feet up a bit, relax, and we'll catch you this time next week. So from Vicky and I, see you later.
Bye.